And without further ado, I'd like to ask Jessica Aldridge back up to the stage. Jessica, if you would please join me. And let me
try it again.
Let's try it again. I'm gonna do that. Didn't work.
Awesome. So just a reminder to everyone, if you do have Q&As or questions, please put them in the Q&A column. That will help us to be able to see them, because it's a bit difficult for us to go through the entire chat. And then also, if you have comments or things that you want to share, put that in the chat section, but not the Q&A section, and try to keep those separate, because then that will be easier for us to make sure that we get to your question, and we definitely want to get to your questions. So again, I am the Sustainability Director for Athens Services. I also see Zero Waste Program Development, and I oversee our food recovery efforts for the company as a whole. Thank you and welcome everyone. Welcome the cities who are joining us, the nonprofit organizations, consultant, waste haulers, everything in between. This workshop that we are holding today, the Greater LA Food Rescue Workshop, is our second time doing this. It is part of the Recycla Food Recovery Program. It's part of the ideas, the concepts that Athens came up with in order to meet some of the needs, or to meet the needs under the Recycla program for food recovery. And every single one of the haulers has their own approach, and we'll talk about that as well. And I hope that you find these presentations to be helpful in these unprecedented times, and as well as we move forward into SB 1383 regulations. And for those that don't know SB 1383, you'll hear it from me, and you're going to hear it from Kyle later on today. So let's go on to the next slide. So just a little bit about Athens. I'm not going to focus on this too much. We are the largest recycling, organics collection, composting, waste hauling company in Los Angeles County, as well as the city of Los Angeles. We have 3 recycling facilities, or MRFs. We're building another one. We are one of the few organics facilities that can take food scraps in order to be able to compost them. We are a landfill avoidance company. We do not own any landfills. Next slide. Jerry went over a lot of this already, and so I'm not going to focus on this too much, but as he said, there's 7 waste haulers, 11 franchise zones. Athens is in those red zones. We have cities from all over. We're not just talking about City of LA today, but I'm hoping that the City of LA program will give you an idea, if you're a city, an idea of what they've done, what might work for you. And if you're a nonprofit food recovery organization, maybe give you some ideas. If you're in the City of LA, if you're servicing the City of LA, ideas on how to participate in their food recovery efforts. And if you're not in the City of LA, then ideas of how to take that and see how that might apply in other cities that you might service. What's really important about this slide, that is not on here, but in concept to Recycla, is that the city of Los Angeles is we create 3 million tons of waste disposed of annually in the City of LA. They want to reduce landfill disposal by 1 million tons per year by 2025, and that equates to a 90% diversion. And that's important to understand as when we talk about reporting and basing that on a 2017 baseline. Next slide. I'm sure all of us have seen these stats. If you haven't and you need more stats like this to understand why food recovery is so incredibly important, you can look up NRDC has some great stats. The LA County Public Health Department under their LAC-free, and that's LACFRI, LAC-free. They have a lot of information there too in regards to the stats that you might need as a waste hauler, as a city. You might want to put some of this information on your website, because SB 1383, as we know, requires us to put a lot of outreach and education on our website. So these stats and the places to get them are going to be important for you to sell home that message as to why it's so incredibly important, and why 40% of the United States food goes uneaten, and what that means, and how do we turn the ship on this. And for Athens Services, in regards to food recovery, in regards to the regulations that are in place, we created a robust full spectrum organics program to decrease food waste before it even reaches the dumpster. And that not only helps the cities that we service meet their diversion goals, it also helps us support the social, economic, and environmental well-being of the communities that we serve. So it's not only meeting that diversion, but it's giving back to the cities that we're serving as well. So in addition to the obvious need of food insecurity, there's also another need that I keep alluding to, and that's on the next slide. And that is state regulation. And so it's this need for to be able to meet the needs for food insecurity, to be able to support food recovery is incredibly important, but it's an extremely hot topic right now because of a piece of legislation called Senate Bill 1383. And I know our cities on here know about this, but maybe some of our food recovery organizations may hear a little bit about it. Maybe they don't know much about it, but this for the food recovery organizations is in your favor. There's work to be done, and Kyle from Cal Recycle is going to get into that later. This piece of legislation is not just about food recovery, it's about reducing organics. That's your putrescible matter, that's the stuff that rots, that's your food scraps, as well as your green waste like your plant matter. That's reducing that to the landfill by 50% by 2020. We're still reaching that, and 75% by 2025. As part of that, though, the state recognizes that a lot of the food that's being disposed should have gone to those people who most need it. It's still edible. And so it's a 20% reduction of edible food by 2025. Again, Kyle will go into that. And why is this important? Why is SB 1383 in place? And it's in place because of AB 32, Assembly Bill 32, which is the Global Warming Solution Act, and to reduce greenhouse gas emissions coming from the landfills. And for those that don't know, it's a crazy fact is that the second largest source of anthropogenic human-related methane emissions in the state of California comes from the organics decomposing in the landfill. It is the third largest source of human-related methane emissions in the United States. So this is the reason why the state is going after this material. Next slide. So responsibilities, food recovery partners and responsibilities. I saw a comment from an individual from Riverside saying we need these integrated relationships. We need the governments working with the nonprofits. We need the private businesses, maybe like the hauler working with the nonprofits, working with the cities. We need this integrated relationship. And I called out some of the food recovery partners on this slide, or the partners for the food recovery agencies. There's more, there's funders, just like Emily was talking about. But in this conversation, we're talking about how do you build these partnerships, and I'm hoping that some of the examples I have will help to provide you with things that you can run with. So there's the generators, the businesses, that's the restaurants, that's the food generators, right? Kyle's going to get into that because that gets a little sticky. You actually, in a couple of years, food recovery organizations are going to have a contract with the businesses, a written agreement or contract, and Kyle will get into that. That's under SB 1383. With the cities, their responsibility as well, Kyle will talk about that a little bit. They must meet Cal Recycle requirements. They've got to meet the requirements under the legislation. They have to ensure that the businesses, the generators, and the food recovery organizations have the relationships as they are required under the piece of legislation. They have to collect data, and they also have to see to understanding what their baseline is for food recovery currently, and then what processes that they can put in place, what funding, whatever is necessary in order to grow the food recovery or to expand food recovery in their cities. That is another responsibility of the city. They may pass some of this responsibility onto the hauler, especially some of the data collection, making sure some of the businesses are on board. That is not guaranteed. That depends on the city. So when you go to a different city and you talk to the waste hauler's responsibility may vary between the cities that they're with. And some of our cities as well may have their own direct funding in order to support food recovery. When it comes to the waste hauler, what are some of the responsibilities? They are not required under Cal Recycle and SB 1383 to have food recovery partnerships, but they might be required under their franchise agreements, their contract agreements with the cities in order to do that. What they are required to do is to help these cities with compliance. And the cities will come to them and say, I need help with X, Y, and Z. What is it that how can we collaborate on this? What help can you provide me? Again, it can vary city to city. It can vary hauler to hauler. It can vary, what I'm doing in Pasadena might be a little bit different than the support that I'm providing in the city of Los Angeles. And a lot of that has to do with the relationships and with the approvals that the waste hauler has with the city. So just keep that in mind, that it might not always be cookie cutter and it might not always be exactly the same. Contractual funding obligation is not guaranteed per city. So just because we're giving money to food recovery agencies in LA, just saying LA and Pasadena, but if we're giving a specific amount in LA, that's not going to mean that same type of funding is guaranteed in, say, Pasadena. And there's no one standard. Every single hauler has their own, the waste hauler has their own standard about how they're going to go through this. But if they're contracted with the city, that standard, whatever programs they have in place, has to be approved by the city. It should be if they're under contract. And then those waste haulers as well, you may run into this, that they have partners that are nationwide. Maybe they're partnering Feeding America. Maybe they want a more localized partnership. With Athens Services, we really believe in building up localized partnerships, and maybe it's a hybrid as well. And they may have stricter reporting obligations than what's required under SB 1383. Again, we take the lead from our cities. And if the city says SB 1383 requires this, but we also require you to collect these other 4 questions, then as the waste hauler, we're going to have to do that. And if you're partnering with us, then we're going to have to request that of you through that partnership. Next slide. So the Recycla food recovery program, Jerry talked about this a bit. That was specifically worked into the franchise agreement, and then that agreement started in 2017. So that funding was part of the contract that we have with the city of Los Angeles. You may find, and maybe the city's on here too, you might want to amend your contracts. We know that can be a pain sometimes. Maybe it's already worked into it. A lot of contracts say that you're going to help us meet the requirements under the most current legislation. It's a catch-all and necessary catch-all because the legislation is always changing, and we have this massive piece of legislation that is SB 1383. If you're coming up with new franchise agreements, as you probably know already, cities, work that into it. With Recycla, restrictions apply. So for us, we're all in different zones. And for like Athens Services, we service the zones of West LA, North Central, and Harbor. So the food recovery efforts that we fund have to be specifically related to the zones that we are in. We cannot help fund collection from a business that's in NASA zone or Republic zone, nor can they do ours. And so there is some restrictions that apply with that. Haulers direct their own efforts. Monthly diversion reports are completely required. And then the baseline. This is also very important. So if you are looking to partner with the city of, in the city of LA under the Recycla program, that the diversion, when counting diversion, and this is something also for the other cities that are on the call, when counting diversion, it is based off of the 2017 baseline that was set, meaning that if a food recovery agency comes to us and says, we've got all this diversion and they've been getting it from business X since 2005, that is not diversion that counts towards those numbers, that 90% diversion that they're trying to reach that we talked about earlier. It's 90% diversion from what is going to landfill at the time of 2017. If you partner with me or any other waste haulers, we'll explain that further. I know it's kind of a little heavy-handed. And so for the hauler, what we provide under the Recycla program is an annual proposed budget, quarterly updates. We have MOUs with our partners, and I stress this is very important to have monthly diversion funding reports, partner information on our website and outreach material, which is the same as SB 1383. And then also that supports SB 1383 is we're constantly providing ideas to the city on ways to expand food recovery efforts. So next slide. So for Athens services, we have a 4-part integrated plan. We have continuous outreach and education, collection, distribution, provide in-kind support, and supporting of infrastructure advancement. So for outreach and education, that this is supportive of food recovery organizations because we have materials like our outline, our brochure. We also train our recycling coordinators with the LA County Public Health Department's outreach program for food recovery to understand how to better support our food recovery organizations. And this list is also extremely important to our cities as well if you're trying to figure out how it is that a waste hauler might be able to support. Collection of distribution and support. So for Athens, some of our food recovery organizations, we have a per pound rate. We also set a ceiling because we only have up to a certain amount of funding that we can provide. So we provide a per pound rate, but up to a certain point. Some waste haulers have a fixed rate. Sometimes we provide administrative and training and outreach fees. We also provide in-kind service for organics collection because that is under the state legislation. You're taking food, you're going to have wasted food, you're going to need an organics container for collection. That is a cost to you. That is a cost that I believe you should not have to bear as a food recovery organization. And that is a cost that Athens Services and other waste haulers are that have chosen to be able to provide that in kind. And then supporting infrastructure and growth is necessary. That is supporting of grants. We have a grant program yearly. We buy the sink, we get a freezer, whatever it is in order to grow. And those proposals are reviewed by the city and approved by the city, and everything is evaluated each year. Next slide. So to ensure successful partnerships, those are the last 2 slides here. This for our food recovery organizations, if you're talking to a hauler, you're talking to a funder, like Emily said, you need to know your needs. Be realistic and specific to your current needs. Think outside of the box. When I go to a food recovery agency and ask what it is that they need, the first thing I usually get, I need a truck. They don't have a driver. They don't have a parking spot. They don't have anywhere to drive, and they don't have the insurance for it, but they would love to have a truck. And that might not truly be their need in the short term. But a lot of times it scales in order to calculate diversion. It is an additional freezer. Think outside of the box. Think about what it is that you specifically need. Investigate your partner options as well. Reach out to your city. See what their upcoming plans are. They may not have them yet for SB 1383. They may. Who is your waste hauler? Call them. Meet, brainstorm, share your ideas. I have 30 to 60-minute conversations with our food recovery partners, and we start throwing all these ideas out there to try to figure out where is it that we can focus right now. And a question that is incredibly important for you to answer, because this is what the cities are looking for as it applies to SB 1383. How can you, as a food recovery organization, help increase city capacity and ensure local growth? Because they need to know that. How can you be part of that solution? And people say, well, who do I talk to? I call up the hauler and I get the customer service and I don't know where to go. Ask to talk to their sustainability lead, their food recovery lead, or if you're calling from a specific city, so they're like Athens, be like, who's the government affairs rep for Monrovia? Ask to talk to that person. Probably come back to me, but ask to talk to that person because they're gonna help get you exactly what it is that you need. Always create an MOU and a plan. Also, it's helps with SB 1383. You're going to have to provide reporting and invoices. You need those scales. You have to measure correctly what it is they're collecting. And they get listed on different website resources like LA County, like lafoodwaste.com directory, and the waste haulers and cities websites as well. The next slide. So this is just an example of successful partnerships. This is Food Cycle. This is an organization that we have been partnering with since 2017. From 2019 to 2020, as of today, they've increased their diversion by over 1,000% and went from 34 agencies in 2019 to 134 receiving agencies as of today. So this is what funding can do. This is what partnerships with waste haulers and with the cities can do. And we've provided skills, transport bags, and then recently we've provided some staff support as well. So that is the end of these slides.
Thank you, Jessica. We have time for a couple of quick questions, and then anyone who has further questions for Jessica after that can join her at the Athens table during the breakout session.
I don't think we have a table, but you can find me at one of the tables.
I'll make a table for you, girlfriend. Don't worry. One of the questions, can I get a copy of the slides? Yes, I'm going to be sending a copy of the slides out to everybody after this, and I am recording this as well. And this is Emmy Beth made a previous question about school donations. I think we can ask Emily that at her table. And do we have any other questions for Jessica before we move on? Okay, well, then thank you so much, Jessica. That was a really informative presentation. And I would like to introduce to the stage our next presenter, Miss Marianne Kulikov. She's a nonprofit executive with 10 years of experience in nonprofit fundraising and management. And I actually met her when she was leading St. Francis Center through the onset of the pandemic and as executive director. And now she is currently working as a nonprofit consultant and grant writer, helping small to medium-sized nonprofits, including health and human services, education, environmental, youth development, and literacy organizations to build their capacity, construct new facilities, and sustain their operations. So this Marianne is a jack of all trades. She's a really wonderful person to know, and I am so excited to bring her to the stage. So Marianne, if you want to turn on your camera and mic, I hope you are here. Yay, great. I'll let you take it away then.
Well, good morning, and thank you for the introduction, Allison. My name is Marianne Kulikov, and it's so nice to be here with everyone today virtually. I just wanted to start by thanking Athens Services, Recicla, and Elaplate for making this event possible, and Allison for doing such a great job organizing as well. I've had the pleasure of partnering with Athens Services for several years now, working to connect with their food-related clients, including markets, food distributors, restaurants, to recover perfectly good food that otherwise would be thrown away in landfills and use it to feed those in need. To give you a little background about myself, 10 years ago, I began my career in nonprofit fundraising and development at St. Francis Center, an organization dedicated to rescuing food from its surrounding community to provide hot meals daily for homeless guests and weekly pantry services for low-income families. I'd like to show you this brief video showcasing St. Francis Center and their work, and I'm going to try to pull it up. Bear with me. Let's see if that works. All right, so I just wanted to give you that little overview of the work St. Francis Center is doing and also talk about where we're at now. So at the beginning of this year, homelessness was at an all-time high with over 66,000 people experiencing homelessness in Los Angeles. LA also has the largest food insecure population in the nation, with 1 in 5 households living with food insecurity. But now, since the onset of the pandemic and the economic hardships so many have endured over the last 9 months, homelessness is expected to have increased already by 16%. And 1 in 4 households now are experiencing food insecurity as well. The work of nonprofits providing hunger relief is now more important than ever. I'd like to invite you to join me following today's presentations on ways we can discuss the collective effort of how we can ensure more perfectly good food can be used to feed those in need during the pandemic and beyond. But first, I'd like to share more about my journey over the past 9 months navigating the pandemic, representing a human services nonprofit. I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned is that I've been reminded of almost daily is that life is unpredictable. You're not going to know what's coming next, and we should always be ready for change. In March this year, everything changed. At the onset of the pandemic, as executive director at St. Francis Center, the initial challenge was a lack of concrete direction from state or local government for nonprofits providing essential services. We made the decision early on with our management team and board of directors to immediately modify our soup kitchen and food pantry to to-go only operations and implemented updated health protocols, including deep cleaning and disinfecting of frequently touched surfaces throughout the day, increased hand washing for all staff and volunteers, use of gloves, hand sanitizer, and homemade masks when none were available in the beginning. I remember even washing all of my cloth napkins from home and bringing them to work for employees to fashion into masks. Anyone who has ever worked for a nonprofit knows that resources can often be limited, so you learn to utilize every donation to the fullest. So the one benefit when the pandemic hit was that we had already stockpiled recent donations of hand sanitizer, soap, disinfectant, and cleaning supplies in an effort to keep costs down, which wound up getting us through the first several months of the pandemic, when it was impossible to purchase hand sanitizer and most cleaning supplies in stores and online. This allowed us to continue to operate safely for our staff and guests. Another significant challenge from the beginning was experiencing an almost immediate drop-off in our large volunteer base. The center relies on over 7,000 volunteers annually, donating over 30,000 hours of support, which made it possible to operate our daily programs with just a small staff of only 14. We hired 4 unbudgeted employees immediately, including 2 security guards to help maintain proper social distancing in line outside for 200 guests daily who came for the hot meal program and hundreds of families who came for the weekly pantry services. We also hired 2 temporary program assistants to support existing program staff and few remaining volunteers with the preparation of all meals and pantry boxes, which now requires a lot more time to be packed to go. Because the center immediately modified its programming to go style, including a drive-through pantry service option, and put our more stringent health protocol into place starting March 11, by the time the Safer at Home order was issued on March 20, the center had worked out most of the initial logistical kinks and didn't miss a beat serving guests through our daily hot meal and food pantry programs. Annually, the center rescues over 1.5 million pounds of food from a variety of donors, including Target, Costco, Trader Joe's, Sprouts, USC's dining halls before they close, the Coliseum, and partners including the LA Regional Food Bank, Food Forward, Food Finders, and more. As supermarkets began experiencing shortages of essentials like water, toilet paper, and food, we anticipated the shortages would affect food donations in the near future. Our management team immediately ramped up outreach to all existing partners to keep in close communication about any potential drop-offs in quantity or variety of food donations. This ongoing communication was instrumental in ensuring that if donations of a specific type of food dropped off, efforts to supplement from other food donors would immediately increase. Thanks to the hard work of the center staff, we were able to consistently provide a nutritious, hearty meal daily for soup kitchen guests and a variety of over 60 pounds of fresh produce, staples like meat, beans, pasta or rice, and pantry goods weekly through our efficient to-go model. Management also aggressively increased our outreach efforts with existing partners and stakeholders to seek out new food donors. Through this engagement, we were able to add 5 new food donors to our regular pickup schedule in just the first few months of the pandemic, and new unscheduled donations of produce, food staples, and pantry items as well. Communication with our food bank partners also helped provide critical feedback that led to more pre-boxing at these larger organizations before the center would pick up donations, which significantly cut down prep time on site with the center's limited staffing. Thanks to the our efforts to bolster our food rescue program, we were able to keep up with the demand for our programs 2 months into the pandemic, when program numbers dramatically spiked. Specifically, demand for the daily hot meal program increased by 100% and 200% for our pantry services, as similar nonprofits halted operations, and word spread that the center was not only able to keep operating, but also was ramping up operations. Around the same time at the end of May, food donations from some of our existing donors took a sharp drop of about 30%, but we were able to keep up with the demand for our services thanks to the new food donors. Continuing to navigate the uncharted waters of the pandemic brought another challenge: implementing proper procedures in the event that an employee would test positive for COVID-19. The number one thought that kept me up at night was that despite all of our efforts to adhere to strict health protocol and social distancing guidelines, that the health of one of my employees might be compromised if they contracted COVID-19. Our management team had devised a detailed plan in the event that an employee tested positive or started exhibiting symptoms early on. Over the past 9 months, 2 employees did test positive for COVID-19 and were immediately sent home, instructed to quarantine and contact their health provider. Our management team then conducted detailed contact tracing, and fortunately, both employees were asymptomatic. As an extra precaution, we also paid to have an electrostatic spray disinfecting service performed both times throughout the center, and we were able to resume operations with remaining staff again. So now, as we are experiencing a surge in COVID-19 cases once again, lines become longer and longer outside of soup kitchens and food pantries, and the economic impact of the pandemic means long-term financial hardship for more and more people in our Los Angeles community. We must use opportunities like this event today, with so many government, nonprofit, and community leaders in attendance, to continue to find solutions together to rescue more perfectly good food that otherwise would be thrown away, to fight food insecurity through the pandemic and beyond. I look forward to getting a chance to speak with many of you in the breakout sessions today and brainstorm on how we can do just that to ensure that no one goes hungry this holiday season and into the new year. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Marianne. That's great. I just noticed that a lot of us didn't realize we had to press the play button on your video. So do you want to play that again really quick, and then everybody can have the chance to actually watch it?
Sure. That's just going to be kind of a brief overview of some of the impact. So let me pull up that again. Let's see if this works. And it's only about a minute into it.
So everybody can go ahead and press play here. Oops. There we go. Okay, great.
I didn't play the full video, but just about a minute in kind of gives a good overview. So,
Okay, great. All right, so there's some questions here, and I know some people asked questions for Jessica as well. So while people are typing in questions for you, Marianne, Jessica, do you want to come back and offer some answers?
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I started typing some of the answers in the chat for people. It says our food org is a food rescue distributor to individuals. We get our food from food banks. That's normal. We do we need to build partnerships with haulers and measure waste? It depends on what your partnership is. So you never need a partnership with a waste hauler. That is not required by state law or even by your city. However, your efforts might support the growth of food recovery. I keep looking this way, the growth of food recovery in your city. So it might be good for you to know what the city's plans are and how they're supporting growth within your city. If that is partnering, if there's the opportunity to go to the waste hauler and say, hey, do you have funding available to help with a grant of some sort to help? We need a double sink. We need another small fridge or whatever it is, because the diversion that we're getting right now and getting out to the communities who most need it could expand by 50%, because we could expand our capacity if we have more infrastructure available to us. So you don't have to partner with a waste hauler, but you might want to see if there's some funding there for you, for sure. Does Athens haul food? No, we do not haul food. We do not haul edible food. We haul food scraps. We haul what's waste once it's there. And someone, I think it also said, do we try to get the food to the people who can use it? Again, once it's in the organics container, once it's in a dumpster, we do not practice freeganism. We're not going through the dumpster and pulling out food for people to eat. That food needs to not be in the dumpster in the first place. So we work with the businesses in order to make sure they're not throwing away edible food, giving them the outreach and the education materials, connecting them to our food recovery partners, and or sending them somewhere where they can connect to the food recovery partners of their choice. Maybe it's not one of our partners, maybe it's someone else. So we do not haul the food. And if there are other Q&As in here, I can go through it. I don't know if I saw any others. Clarification, when you say food haulers, no, not food haulers, food waste haulers. So food scrap is the operative word because there should be no food waste. It should be wasted scrap. So hopefully that answers the question.
Do we have any, we have one more question. Do you promote diversion to farm animals?
Yes, so that's part of the City of Los Angeles program as well. It's a little bit more difficult. It's not straight away. They can take everything. I know there's some pig farms in Las Vegas that can take a heck of a lot of material. We also have programs set up, conversations set up with local. There's one organization, one waste hauler that's takes stuff over to the LA Zoo, and then the aquarium and things of that nature. It takes a lot of fish to feed an otter. So as I have found, but a lot of time, unfortunately, what happens is this food is tainted when you get a mass amount of it, especially like meat, and meat is extremely difficult to be able to donate back out, because a lot of these businesses, even if they know it's not illegal to, even if they're told by the LA County Public Health Department, if they're told about the federal laws for safety laws of the Good Samaritan Act, it doesn't matter. They are so afraid of being sued that a lot of the time we find tons and tons of meat being disposed of on a weekly basis, and they will not donate it. So we work as hard as we can to get them to do it, but it is very difficult. But in those circumstances, that is not something that would go to human, that would go to animals, or, the other side of animals.
And I have a question for Marianne. If I were a city or a waste hauler, or maybe even a nonprofit organization, and I wanted to partner with someone like you with your expertise, what should I look for? How can I find that right person to help me out?
Well, I think that's a great question. I think, a lot of nonprofits, management team and staff members, they wear a lot of hats. But I think, the first place to start is really, just talk to the executive director. At St. Francis Center, we had a great management team and worked very closely with our warehouse manager too, to kind of start those new partnerships and talk about what the next steps were. So I think, really reaching out and starting that communication with the executive director to see where the organization is at, see what they have in place. Do they have the right amount of drivers that can go and then rescue the food? Do they have the capacity on site to keep the food fresh? So at St. Francis Center, we were fortunate. We just had received a grant from Cal Recycle, and it allowed us to build a whole new walk-in refrigerator, which doubled the space that we were able to hold and keep food safe in. And then we also had received a truck, a large refrigerated truck, through a previous grant through Cal Recycle, which allowed us to rescue even more food than ever. And then we actually just finished during the pandemic, which, if you can believe it, in the middle of the pandemic, we did a full kitchen renovation, which then allowed us to prepare more of that food that we were rescuing and feed it to the guests in need. So I think, reaching out, starting the conversation about, what the team has in place and what their schedule would allow for starting those new pickups and new relationships is the best first step.
Thank you. And there's another question for you here. Is your organization experiencing less ability of food since farmers to families has decreased?
I think when you have an organization like San Francisco Center, the key is diversity. So you really, the goal has always been to diversify where the food comes from. So you don't want to just rely on a couple big providers, because if there's drop off and there's something that's affecting the supply chain, you want to be able to have access to not just more quantity of food from a lot of different providers, but a good variety. So you want to have the variety of produce, and that doesn't just come from one food donor. So that when something happens like that, then you can rely on other food donors to supplement what's missing. The key is providing a variety of nutritious, fresh produce for people in need, so that what you're providing is something quality. It's not something that's just focusing on prepackaged food that's easily accessible. So that's what we really tried focusing on.
Thank you. And here's another question for you. How do you get buy-in from restaurants and businesses to donate?
Well, there's, a lot of things in place that protect restaurants and food providers or food, organizations that are preparing food on site from being liable. So it's really just reaching out and communicating that. That's something that I think, being in the nonprofit industry for over 10 years, I don't think that was something that was readily available about 10 years ago. I think because we've had workshops like this, because there's networking among all these food rescue organizations, that information is so much more readily available. So people know that I can donate food and I'm not going to be liable for it. So, but just continuing that conversation and communicating with those potential new food donors is key to making them feel comfortable.
Great. And there's a question here. Has your organization experienced a shortage of output due to the less amount of volunteers coming to help? And if so, how has your agency tackled that? That's a very interesting question.
I think when you have a small nonprofit, like I was mentioning, everyone wears multiple hats. So I think pre-pandemic, we always were very good at figuring out, all right, if we're presented with a challenge, what can we do with the resources we have in the best way possible? So, in the beginning, we were fortunate that our food donations did not drop off. Even though volunteers did drop off, our kind of small crew just jumped right in, and within a couple of days, we were able to modify everything. So I think bringing on a few additional staff members, we actually had some volunteers, regular volunteers, who we brought on as those temporary program assistants, which I mentioned during the presentation. And they already knew the operations of how we ran the programs. So bringing them on as the temporary support was critical to just ensure that we were able to still operate the programs, move everything to a to-go model. But also the challenge really was before, if you have a crew of say 10, 15 volunteers in the center and they're helping sort through the food before you start the program, that's a good amount of extra hands. So the challenge was then, if you're doing the to-go model of operations, everything needs to be pre-packaged or pre-boxed. So that means you're rescuing the food one day, then you need to sort through the food with the existing staff that you have, and then you need to pre-box all of those boxes. Say you have 40, 50 families that are going to be coming for the pantry services that day, to get it done in enough time. So that was the kind of biggest challenge in the beginning of the pandemic, in figuring out how can we logistically make this possible, get everything ready, and then also have enough people to operate the programs. But we had kind of a magic number of passionate team members that made it possible. And actually a few existing volunteers that were able to stay on as well.
Great. And there's a question here from Julie, and I wanted to kind of talk about that a little bit, because I have I've been working on a homelessness documentary and working with a lot of different homeless groups about the food waste, the food donations that are happening, that are popping up at homeless encampments, because a lot of well-meaning individuals are coming with lots of random food that they have left over from schools or from an event or from their home, and what ends up happening a lot of time is that it's food that people don't want to eat. Like I know this one kid, he's a vegan, and people come with a lot of meaty products, which some of his friends will eat at the encampment, but not all of the people eat it, and it ends up just being rotting meat. And there's not a lot of effort that we can do other than just try to talk to the general public about how it's best to try and work with our local nonprofit organizations that are feeding people, rather than directly give donations to these encampments. Because when you have services that are needed, that are not just the basic food, shelter, water, there are also a lot of psychological, life skill building things that need to happen when somebody ends up on the streets. And that happens when you are able to make that connection with a nonprofit, with a trained person from a nonprofit organization who is able to go to that encampment. So the more education we can do about that, I think the better it will be for reducing the amount of waste that happens. There's a lot of hoarding that happens. That's a mental illness that happens with people that live in homeless encampments. And actually something that one of the encampments was asking me is, how do we get pickups of this junk that's collecting at some of these encampments? Obviously the city comes in and does sweeps sometimes, but is there a way that they can start to call or schedule a pickup of the mattresses and the broken chairs and the things that are winding up at these encampments? And Jessica, maybe you can speak to that.
I think also someone's sharing their screen right now. One of our speakers, I don't know if Allison, you can turn that off or if you see it, but there's a little window with a bunch of little names. There you go. I actually, if Jerry's still on, I think Jerry would be the better person to talk about this. The City of Los Angeles Recycle program with the waste haulers. We are not contracted under the city to do pickup of illegal dumping. That is the LA sanitation. That's different for every city. So for the city of LA, that is their own sanitation system, and that is calling 311. But again, yeah, there's Jerry. Jerry, do you want to speak to that?
So, yeah, it's been a challenge dealing with food that's been donated to the homeless, because what will happen is they'll come in, and unfortunately some of the produce marts, instead of paying to have their food managed by one of the recycled service providers, they'll pay, one of these homeless people money, and they'll take pallets of food or racks of food and take them to their friends, if you will, in the alleys, and then they end up there. They end up putrefying. Then we have a rodent issue, and it's been a challenge. The city is basically just chasing this constantly. You'll go into an area, you'll clean an alley, you'll remove several tons of waste, and once it's cleaned up, then it comes right back again. And sometimes it is because of the actual produce vendors, the customers, who again don't want to pay for the service, and they'll do what's called we call a midnight dump. So it's a challenge that we're constantly chasing. I wish I had a better answer to better deal with this and the encampments, but it's a hard one to really wrap our hands around, as I'm sure Jessica and the smaller haulers that work the downtown area can speak to.
If I can add on to that too, I think one of the challenges that I really witnessed is that when our volunteers had to drop off, they couldn't come into the center anymore. People just want to find a way to be able to help, and I think that's so wonderful. So I think really, a good suggestion is to try to just Google your local, food bank or soup kitchen like St. Francis Center. Reach out, and if there's something that you want to do, like donating food, talk to them first, because nonprofits are so good at being resourceful. And with food rescue, over the years of having so much experience in rescuing all different types of food, we can either point you in the right direction, possibly even accept the food donation and help distribute it. It could be something now where volunteer opportunities are opening up in safe ways as well. That person could donate the food and then help be part of the distribution. I think logistically, when you think of, someone who wants to donate the food and they want to show up at an area where perhaps there are encampments and distribute the food themselves, there's extra logistical things that need to be considered because of the pandemic and providing proper social distancing. So, while you are attempting to do something and you have the best intentions at heart, you may not be thinking about logistically, there's starting to be a line of guests lining up that want the food. How then do you manage spacing everyone out appropriately and, really controlling the flow of that distribution? So really, I would strongly suggest reach out to your local nonprofit, provider, food bank, soup kitchen, and ask for some suggestions, and they will be more than happy to get you involved.
I also want to point out that, and I put in it, if Cal Recycle could speak to this, that's our last speaker before we do the breakouts. But under SB 1383, and most of the people who are on here today are food recovery organizations and are the cities. So we're not talking directly right now to the businesses or these places that might be going and dumping the food in hopes that someone who is experiencing housing insecurity might be able to benefit off of that food. Maybe some of our nonprofit organizations have done that, but under SB 1383, it is required for these businesses to have contracts or written agreements with food recovery organizations. And under that, they have to supply how much tonnage, how much diversion, how much food, edible food that they even have available. They are not in compliance with SB 13. They say we diverted our food by taking it down to the corner and giving it to someone who was experiencing housing insecurity. So SB 1383 does set up standards to help in some of these areas to make sure that this material is legally being distributed.
We have one more question for you, Jessica, it looks like, and then we're going to all take a break for 5 minutes before we come back and have Cal Recycle Martine present. So the question is, with COVID, there's an increase in food packaging. Is there anything being done to minimize this?
That's a really good question. So under the food recovery program, that is not a requirement. It's not a requirement under SB 1383. It's not a requirement under the food recovery program for the city of Los Angeles. And just a reminder, I am the sustainability director. I work outside of Athens as well on issues of sustainability and equity when it comes to waste. But I just want to put it out there real quickly that a waste hauler is there to pick up this material and deliver it somewhere to be recycled, disposed, or composted. There needs to be more upstream responsibility that is happening. We need extended producer responsibility. The businesses that are providing this material need to make sure that they are providing material that can actually be composted or truly composted in the existing infrastructure, not bioplastics, truly composted in the existing infrastructure, and can also truly be recycled in the existing infrastructure. And if it can be composted, it's not recyclable. If it's recyclable, it can't be composted. That's a misnomer that people think that, oh, it's recyclable, it's beneficial to landfill. That's not true. So as some of you know, I am very opinionated on this area. But there is an uptick on food packaging, especially when it's to-go packaging. This is where, a waste hauler can be helpful because we're going and we're talking to these businesses on a consistent basis. So for Athens services, we provide them outreach materials. We have a single-use alternatives list. So when we go in and we're like, you have all this single-use disposables, here's a list of breaking it down as to each one of those products of what we think they should trade it out with in order to minimize their footprint. So we try to do as best as we can when we go in and do visual waste assessments and things of that nature. But again, in the city of Los Angeles, again, extended producer responsibility needs to exist. And in the city of Los Angeles, there are amazing environmental and social justice organizations that are working with the city of LA to push forward on resolutions to make it so that we can help to reduce single-use disposables. And if you would like to look up an organization that's really working on that, or a coalition of organizations working on that, you can look up Reusable LA, reusablela.org, and they are part of a larger coalition of organizations, statewide and nationwide, that work on single-use disposables, along with Upstream and Story of Stuff and other amazing organizations pushing against plastic pollution.
Thank you very much. All right, well, we're going to take a 5-minute break. So everybody, I'm going to turn the presentation off so we're back at our tables. Please turn on your cameras and microphones to chat, and have a, grab a water, have a break, and we'll see you again at 10:55.